Welcome back. I am done with the sanding sealer, and I pointed out what I was using and all of that, but I ended up doing several coats. My plan was to do 2. I think I ended up doing 3 just because of the way it ended up soaking in. And then what you're seeing now is once the sanding sealer dried, and I did this Saturday morning, this is now Sunday morning, and I just finished that up yesterday, let that kind of do its thing and dry and all of that, and I'm just going to hold it up this way and kind of spin around so you can see the finish is dulled down because I've taken steel wool, and steel wool was all that I needed to use on top of the sanding sealer. I did steel wool in between the coats of sanding sealer as well, and I'm really pretty happy with how this looks. You can see every little flaw and everything under the really bright bench light, but if you go into a normal room, lighting and all of that, even with the sanding, just the sanding sealer on it, it looked really good. So I think we're gonna be really happy with, I'm going to be really happy, and my daughter's going to be really happy with where this ends up. So again, I just took steel wool on top of the sanding sealer to get everything smooth. My recommendation to you, a couple of things that I learned along the way: if you're not careful around the edge, you will kind of burn through and have to do some touch up, and I had to do that, some touch up with the stain in a few places. And so I fixed that. And then the other thing, you can always go to a rougher grit. So for example, I started with steel wool, and I ended up not needing to go any rougher than that to get this really smooth. But had I had raised spots and all of that, I could have gone from the steel wool down to like 2000 sandpaper, 1600, whatever. So the can said to sand with 120 in between, and had I done that, I would have sanded all the way through and actually removed the stain. So the finer grit that you can use, and you still need to do something because you need to give a tooth to the next layer that's going on. So we're going to be doing some polyurethane over the top of this, so I did need to do something and not just put the poly on over the top of the sanding sealer the way it was. So I did steel wool, and I did that all over everything. It feels really good. It looks really good. I mean, outside of having a spray booth to do something, which I don't here, I'm not sure I could get it any better. There are probably people who could, of course, but as far as just me doing it, I'm pretty happy with where I am. So what I'm going to do is bring you along on this. I've got some polyurethane. This is a water-based polyurethane. This is Varathane Ultimate water-based, ultimate scratch resistance. And this is actually crystal clear semi-gloss. I've used this on other projects. We're making, like I said in some of my earlier videos, my wife and I are making presents for a lot of people this year for Christmas, and I've used this type of application, the same thing that I'm doing here, on those things, and it turned out really well. So that's kind of what gave me the idea for this. So I think what I'm going to show you here is, like I did on the sanding sealer, I'm going to start here, kind of work my way around, and I'll have to figure out how to hold it, but I'm going to do the sides first, and then I'm going to lay it flat like so and put a nice coat of the polyurethane on the back, and then once that dries, I'll flip it over do a coat on the front. And you want to be careful around the edges because you don't want runs down the side this way. So once I flip, when I'm doing the back, I don't want the polyurethane running that way. And then the same, you don't want stuff as you're doing the sides. You want to be careful and not get a bunch of the polyurethane running onto the front and all of that. So you just have to be careful as you're doing this. It just takes a lot of time, and the more time you take, the better things are going to do, or the better things are going to be. I have a hard time talking this morning, but I'm just going to use a nylon bristle brush. You could use, and I've got a bunch of these foam brushes, and you could use those. What I find with the foam brushes is if you're not careful, you'll get a lot of bubbles because as you're going back and forth, the sponge has a tendency to create a lot of air bubbles, and then you have to spend more time and do more layers and all that. So I'm going to use, I'm going to try using a bristle, or this nylon bristle brush, and see if that works out any better. I'm going to pause you really quick, and then I need to open and stir the polyurethane, and then I'll do part of it on camera and then a bunch of it off camera, and then I'll bring you back and show you the results before we move on to the next step. The other thing that I'll show you down the road is I talked in one of the earlier videos about filling those holes that were pre-drilled in the back of the headstock, and I did do that. I had some wood filler here, and I ended up mixing the stain that I used for the neck and the back of the headstock. I mixed a little bit of that stain with the wood filler and put it on, and it really, from a distance, you cannot see those holes. So I think we're going to be fine. Let me grab it really quickly. So I think if I hold it under the lights, under the lights here, you can probably see where I've touched it here. So if you get up close and personal, you can see it, but under the normal lighting, it really kind of blends in with the other grain that's on the back of the headstock. And once I poly over it and then get the tuners on and all of that, it's not going to be noticeable at all. Here's where I ended up on the top of the headstock. I need to do a little bit of steel wool before put the coats of poly on that. But the process is basically the same. So let me pause you. I'm going to stir the polyurethane, and then I'll bring you back and kind of walk you through what I'm going to do. So I'll be right back with you. Okay, back with you. I've got the polyurethane over here to my right. It has been stirred up well. Let me just add, I didn't mention this at all along the way, but just as a safety thing for you, for those of you that may be trying this and you're using oil-based stains, or even on other videos you've watched me take the linseed oil, and I use linseed oil and oil fretboards and all of that, and I use paper towels for that. Let me just say, you want to be careful, because the way, and I'm not a chemist or anything like that, but the way the oils dry, if you wad up the paper towels and just like stuff them in a bag or something, it generates heat and they can catch fire. So be careful with that, and maybe what I do is when I'm done, I'll immediately wet them down, put them in a bag, take them outside, and get rid of them that way. So just be careful with that, because it can be a bit of a safety issue there. So again, I'm going to start with the sides, and you do have to be a little more careful with the poly. Now this water-based polyurethane that I'm using, it does go on a bit cloudy, but when it dries, it's clear, so no issues with that. And again, I'm not sure how much of this I'm going to cut or edit or whatever. I'm going to show you. I want to show you a little bit. And again, putting it on doesn't really matter on brush strokes, but to finish it, I always come back and go with the grain of the wood. And what I'll do is in this neck pocket here, I want to wipe that out, and then I don't want a lot of runs around the sides or the edges, so I'm wearing gloves, and I'll just use that. But that's kind of the process. The brush strokes will actually lay down and even out, so I'm not too worried about that. Again, it doesn't matter on the edges. I kind of paint out toward the edge with the poly, and I can go multiple directions. Again, as long as I come back, nice even strokes, and I'm not using a lot of pressure. I'm just very light pressure here. And then I'll take a little bit of time and kind of wipe my edges, and that will actually lay down. I don't know if you can see those. Hold it up there a little closer to the camera for you, but you could probably see where those brush strokes are in there. That will even out. The polyurethane will settle down. That'll even itself out. Again, I've done this on other projects that we're doing as Christmas presents we made, and I may even bring one of those in and show you. We made some phone stands and tablet stands for people as Christmas presents, and they turned out just really, really nice. I just used inexpensive pine that you would go to your home improvement store and get, and they turned out really, really good. Now I didn't do the shiny finish that we're going to do on here with the wipe on poly. This ended up being the finish that we did on those. So, but I may bring one of those in and show it to you so you can kind of see where I got the idea. And that's a good way to just kind of experiment with stains and finishes, because the wood is inexpensive, and you can buy a whole 4 foot, 8 foot, 6 foot, 8 foot section of board, and it's $3 or $4, and then you can work with your finishes and all of that. So again, careful not to get stuff running over the edges. So I just use my glove, my thumb in the glove, and I'm on a towel here too, so I'm just kind of wiping that there. But again, all different directions to get coverage, but then back with the brush strokes with the grain of the wood. And in this first coat, I'm really going with a light application of the poly and let it dry. Again, better, I think I mentioned this earlier in this particular video, you're better to do multiple thin coats rather than trying to do a thick coat of finish. And you can see, let me kind of show you that. You can see how milky that looks. That will dry clear, so that's not an issue. It's just that's kind of a low part on the guitar body, and so the poly wants to kind of run that direction. You can always go back like this and thin it out a little bit. Again, I'm just a proponent of thin, even coats as opposed to trying to get everything done at once. But you're better off, and I'm kind of playing a little bit too much here, so you're better off just kind of getting it on there and get a thin, even coat, checking my edge, and then moving on. So I don't want to play too much, because I cause myself some problems by doing that. It'll start getting tacky, and then you will see the brush strokes is what ends up happening. You play too much. Alright, so again, just putting a thin coat on here, kind of making sure that I get full coverage. I just don't want a really thick. I'd rather have to put 3 or 4, even 3 or 4 coats on, really thin, and not have to do a lot of sanding in between. And I think I bumped you there, so I apologize if the camera's... I got you on the overhead, as I have throughout this project, and that's a new thing for me in the way that I have it set up here over the bench. If I stick my head too far over, I end up bumping the camera, and so I apologize for that, bumping you around a little bit. Again, just doesn't really matter how you put it on, but you want to come back and run with the grain as you're doing it. And I try to go, kind of went backwards on that. I try to go from dry to wet. That kind of helps not have ridges that you got to end up sanding out. So again, thin. You'll see the brush strokes, but just the nature of the poly, it will settle out. And I think what I will do, I'm going to come down to, let's see, I think I'm going to come down to the center line here and stop and let this dry, because this water-based polyurethane doesn't take long to dry. And let this side dry and just leave it sitting here, and then I can flip it over and do the other side. That way I don't take a chance on messing anything up. And so you have a little bit of working time too. You hear me kind of just chatting with you and all of that. And I'm not worried about these pre-drilled holes. If we need to, we can re-drill the holes, but I don't think we'll have to do that. But I think what I'm going to do is roughly half-ish of the side, get a nice even coat, and then again come back. And I start from where I don't have any poly on the dry, and then work my way to where I've already kind of been. And that just, again, keeps from having a ridge. If I went the other way, and I might be able to show you, yeah. So if I went the other way, I would have this ridge. You can kind of see here, have this ridge of the polyurethane, and then that gets to be a buildup, and you have to sand that down smooth. The way that I've done it by going from backwards, if you want to call it that, is I don't have the buildup in between. So that'll end up being nice. It'll lay down flat. We'll come back, we'll hit it with some steel wool once it's dry, and then do another coat. And I think I'm going to leave that, let that dry, and that's really kind of the process of putting this on. Any of these products, as I mentioned earlier, I recommend that you read the directions as far as like drying time for things like, especially if anything that's oil based, and you know, whether you can put certain things over the top of things and use it with other things and stuff like that. You really kind of need to do some reading, maybe even some testing, as I mentioned, with some, you know, just buy some inexpensive pieces of wood and do some testing. But I'm going to leave you there and continue this part of the polyurethane and do a couple of coats and see how it looks. I'll bring you back, give you an update before, especially before I start the gloss part of the finish, and I'll just kind of keep you in the loop all along the way. So thanks for watching, and I'll be back with you. Just again, it'll be a few seconds your time, but probably several hours my time. Okay, I thought I'd bring you back just another just super quick update. I've got this is the first coat of the semi-gloss polyurethane, and here's what I'm using, just the Varathane water-based polyurethane. And I think this is going to be super nice. It's smooth. I need to, of course, hit it with steel wool before I do another coat, but I just wanted you to see this, and if you can see some spots where it's kind of a little bit splotchy and all, that's why you do multiple coats. But I've got the back and then the sides, and what I wanted you to see is that real brush strokey look of when it went on is gone, and it flattened itself out. It dried very nice, very clear, and it's a very hard, durable finish. And I did go ahead and do all the way around. The only part that I haven't done is down in this little cutout section here, so I still need to do that, and I still need to do the front. And again, I've got you handheld with the camera here, so I'm going to try not to bounce you around a whole lot or move a whole lot, but I wanted you to see where I was. This actually looks really nice, even with just the semi-gloss finish. So we should be able to get a pretty nice look on this. So again, just a really quick update. I'm going to get busy and finish that little section there, and then the first coat on the top, you can see how dull it is where I hit it with the steel wool. So I'm going to get busy on that, and again, I will bring you back in as I make some progress. I'm going to do at least 2 coats of this polyurethane, maybe even 3. I just want to make sure we have enough, especially as thin as I put it on the back. I did a really thin coat on there, so because I wanted it to dry with the minimal. I'd really want to do minimal work over the top of this before I put the next layer on. I really only want to use the steel wool at this point. So I may end up doing more coats, 3, maybe even 4 coats, just to make sure I have enough to where this is protected and it's not going to get damaged and all of that. But again, just a couple of minutes, wanted to bring you back in, give you an update of where I am. I'm really happy with how we're progressing here, and I'll bring you back in when I'll probably bring you back in after I finish all the layers of the water-based polyurethane. Well, welcome back to the workshop. It is now early on a Monday morning. I'm going to try to get a little bit of stuff done here before I have to head into work. Try to make a little more progress on the kit here. This Fretwire kit, I'm kind of running up against the Christmas deadline here. It's the Monday before Christmas, so I'm down to a week of getting stuff done. So, alright, here's how I've ended up. Let me kind of hold it up for you. This is, I explained to you the process, and I've kind of walked you through here. What you're seeing is I started with the rough, just the raw wood body, sanded with 220, 320, applied the stain, multiple coats. I think it was 3 to 4 coats to get the color that I wanted. And then after that, it was the sanding sealer and 2 to 3 coats of that, and then all I've used in between any of these coats of finish has been steel wool. Haven't used any sandpaper on the body, so that's always good. You can always go rougher. I recommend you start as light or as high of a what do you want to call that, grit, as high a grit as you can, and then if you need to step down, you always, or work your way down, you always can go rougher. But I've gone fairly smooth. What you're seeing right now is after the sanding sealer, I put on 3 coats of a water-based polyurethane, and that has now dried overnight. So that's what you're seeing here. And actually I've already hit this with steel wool, so that's why it's dull. It's a semi-gloss polyurethane that I was using, but it's kind of dulled all over because of the steel wool. So that just gives a basis, or a surface for the wipe-on poly to adhere. So that's where we're going next, and here's what I'm using. I've got Minwax wipe-on poly, and it's a hand rubbed, it says easy to apply, fast drying, blah blah blah. I've read the directions. I recommend you do that on all of your stuff. This says apply a liberal amount. It says to shake it first. I've already done that. And then apply a liberal amount with a clean, soft, lint-free cloth. Rub onto the wood. In this case, we're rubbing it over the poly. Let it dry 2 to 3 hours. Blah blah blah. And then repeat the process for multiple coats. So here we go. I'm going to try, before I have to go get ready for work, is I'm going to follow the same process as I did for the rest of this, just again for me being a little bit methodical so I don't forget any spots. I'm going to start with the sides, lay it down flat, and do the back, let that dry, flip it over. I'll do the top, let that dry. That'll be my first coat, and then repeat the process as many times as I feel that I need to get the finish that we want. And again, we should be able to get a fairly glossy, smooth finish. I'm going to, off to the side here, I'm just cutting, I've got a white t-shirt, and I'm cutting a piece of that is what I'm going to use for my applicator. And that should work really well. So I should have had that cut already. I apologize for doing that off camera there. And then I'm going to use, I just have a piece of t-shirt that I've cut, and I'm just going to use that as my applicator. I've just got a bowl here that I stole from the kitchen, and again, you want to be as dust free, lint free, and all of that as you possibly can, so that as little as possible shows in the final product. And listen, I'll be the first to admit, if you want a super glossy, I mean, if you want something like you're going to get with a Gibson or a Fender or any other, Taylor or whatever, you almost need a spray booth to be able to do that. So I guess if you know somebody that does auto work and has that set up, they could do some spray finishes, and you're going to come out with a probably a better look. But for what we're doing here, I think we're going to come out really good. So what I've done, I just put some here in a bowl. It just says to put a liberal amount from the can. I've been my experience, if you dip it, you can end up with a little better, at least for me it works a little better. So that's how I'm going for it. Now this is oil based, so you do have working time with this, so you can make sure, again, you don't want runs over the sides, so kind of work gingerly out, carefully out to the edges. And I'm gonna, as I've done with the other steps of this process, I'm gonna let you watch. I'm gonna do about half of the sides here and let you watch that process, and then I'll probably either cut it or time lapse it and let you see the finished product. So here we go. And again, I'm just getting a nice amount of this and going to rub it on, and that's pretty much all there is to it. I mean, it's a rub on finish, so that's what we'll do. Just rub it on. Again, working with the grain of the wood. And you do want to go off all the way off of your edge, because you don't want bubbles in your finish. And I am doing around this edge here. I'm not sure how much of that. I think the neck actually covers that little section there, but yeah, I mean, once that dries, that's gonna look super, super nice. So I'm just gonna keep working my way around here. Like I said, you have working time, so I recommend I've got the bright shop lights here. I'm kind of looking around, seeing if I see any spots that I'm not happy with, because I could go back over it. And you do want to keep it fairly wet. That is the other thing that I learned from doing my test piece. And as you come up, you don't want to just stop and then lift, because you'll get, like, the cloth will leave air bubbles. So you want to kind of rub and then lift away. So I think that's going to look really, really nice. Had a little spot there I wasn't super happy with. So I just went back and hit that. So yeah, that's kind of the process. I'm almost halfway around. You can see there. And we'll do 2 to 3 coats of this, just to make sure we have a nice finish. But that's going to look super nice. So once this dries, it'll be glossy, and then we're going to do some polishing, we're going to put wax on there like I normally do on top of this. Again, just like I did on the test piece that I showed you. So we should end up with a really nice looking piece. So I'm going to keep working on this, and I'll bring you back once I'm ready to give you an update. So alright, before I break there, I did forget to mention, and hopefully you're seeing this, not getting too much of a blinding reflection from the shop light, but that is, I've done the sides and the back, but I wanted to just mention before I stop this part of the video that I will be doing and finishing the neck in a separate video, because I'm going to do, as I think I mentioned, I'm going to be doing a fret leveling and other things, and I've got to redo some stuff on the back side of the headstock where I put the filler. So I'm going to redo and rework some of that. I wasn't really happy with how that turned out, so I'm going to be redoing some of that, see if I can get a better result there, but I'll bring that into a separate video. For now, I think we are looking really, really good. Again, I'm just kind of letting the light shimmer across there and see. And any of the, I guess, there's not really, it's the grain of the wood is what it is, but that'll kind of settle and it'll look super, super nice. Again, here's my little test piece, and that's the finish that we're going for, that nice smooth, oop, I splashed something on it, that's no big deal, but this nice smooth look here is the wipe on poly. So that's what we're going for, and I think we're going to be really good. I just have to let this sit now, and it says 2 to 3 hours, so it's going to be way more than that because I'm headed to work. So when I get home this evening, I will flip this over and put a coat of the poly on top. I'm going to seal all this up so I can reuse it. I'll drop the cloth down in a zip bag, a little zip top bag, and I'll actually slide the bowl in a bigger zip top bag just to keep everything sealed so I don't have to worry about stuff drying up and all of that on me. So that's where I am with that. I just wanted to let you know I'm going to do the neck in a separate video because I've got the water slide decal has come in, the logo with his initials, and we're going to put that on, and so I'll put all of that in a separate video. So thanks for watching for now. I'll bring you back later.